computer. Boom. All right, we got our first guest panel thing. I didn't make it like a webinar, so I can't really like focus on the 4 guests, but they're around somewhere in the Zoom's windows. We got Michael Stoppelman.
Hi.
Hi. And let's see, Marty Weiner. My middle name is Weiner. What is your last name?
It is pronounced Wiener, but it's misspelled. Misspelled at Ellis Island about 100 years ago.
Oh, okay. I figured, yeah. Mine's Wiener, but it's IE, so.
Yeah.
All right, got it. And Liana Cohn is here.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. And Alex Polvey.
Hello.
Woo! In the house. Nice. Cool. So thanks for coming to your this IP range or whatever we call it on the internet. And really the theme today, we've got a lot of people. We were talking earlier just about MVPs and ideas and launching and then pivoting and customer feedback and that kind of stuff. So that's the general theme. But first, I just wanted to maybe each of you will just give like a 2 or 3 minute why should we care what you have to think about this? Okay, let's go with Liana, please.
Sure, happy to kick it off. So just a quick background. I went to Stanford, studied computer science and neuroscience. At the time, I was super into gaming and co-founded a gaming company, an AR/VR gaming company called Paymax. I was chief product officer there and did that for a couple of years. And we were actually a B2B company. So after a while, I wasn't spending as much time developing new games as focusing on sales. And so I wanted to work on something from the ground up. And my co-founders at Switch, the company I'm at now, approached me about the idea, and I kind of had thought about something in a similar space. So I made the pivot to fashion. And so now I work on a subscription rental jewelry company called Switch. And we're about 3 years in and it's going great. So I'm president of the company and mostly focus on the product and buying jewelry and kind of overall strategy.
Cool. Should I go next?
Sure, sounds good.
Sweet. Hi, everyone. I've been doing this for a couple of years with Josh. So I'm Michael Stoppelman. And I previously worked at Google pre-IPO, spent 4 years there. My brother started Yelp in 2004. I joined him in 2007 as a software engineer, became a manager, director, VP of Eng, and then SVP of Eng. Was SVP of Eng for about 5 years post-IPO. Grew the engineering team to about 600 and have been investing since 2010. And then when I left Yelp 3 years ago, I decided to start investing full time. So now I invest with Josh, if I can get some of his luck. And so I invest in mostly developer tools, security, healthcare companies as the primary part of my portfolio. And I work alongside tier 1 VCs. So.
Nice, thanks. We'll go Marty.
What's up? What am I? I went to Harvey Mudd, graduated in 2003 with computer science, and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but knew I wanted to be in the startup scene. And I knew I wanted to start a company, found a company, I think. And I did that a lot. And I think I created maybe 20 some odd random different companies over the years. And I still have my website. I keep it. I use it for my email, but it's my constantly rotating startup name called GetYet. And there's nothing there right now. I also have another site called SaladRabbit.com. And the joke is that the way most startups choose their name is they have the name they want, but they can't get the URL for it. So they just string across 2 different names that they can get a URL for. So mine is SaladRabbit.com. Then I jumped. I was working at a company as a compiler guy, learning how to engineer really hardcore stuff, but finding out that business is also important, apparently. So I jumped away from them and decided to join a startup before my mortgage and children took over my ability to do risky things like that. And so I joined these two guys making an app called Tote. It failed on us, but that was the early days of the iPhone. We were ahead of our time, which is synonymous with we failed. And then they came back and said, hey, we're tweaking on the site. What do you think? We're thinking calling it Pinterest. And so I joined them on a whim, and the thing went nuts. And I basically lost about 4.5 years to insanity. And then along the way, I met Alexis Ohanian, one of the founders of Reddit, got to know him, found out that they were having a lot of struggles, and that Reddit was this bizarre story of a company that's 12 years old, but it had been run like a 6-person startup from the beginning. So I joined Steve, one of the other founders who had learned how to be a very successful leader, founding Hipmunk, and rejoining the company. So I joined with him with just the simple goal of making it a normal run Silicon Valley company and not a disaster. And so then I lost 2 years to getting that thing kind of reset and back up and running. And it increased my passion for helping people through extreme growth and traction, because most of the problems come from an inability to manage effectively.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Marty, for being here. And last, but probably not least, Alex.
Thanks, Josh. Good to see Michael again. I think last time I saw him was about a year ago or 6 months ago. I don't remember, on a similar venue. So funny, as Marty was talking, I had a decent amount of weird overlap, although I don't think we ran into each other. I graduated in 2003 from Oregon State. Go Beavers. School, I went to Mozilla, where I was working kind of in the early days, Firefox, doing server infrastructure stuff. Started my first company in 2008 as part of Y Combinator. It's called CloudKick, which was sort of like it's cloud server monitoring and management, but done in like a way like Gmail, like a really rich web app sort of thing. We raised $2.75 million in funding. The company was acquired 2 years later for $40 million by Rackspace. Then I did my time at Rackspace and then started another company. Again, I did Y Combinator in summer 2013, and that was called CoreOS. CoreOS, we ran for 5 years, raised $50 million in funding. Our investors there were, we caught them all of the investor Pokemon. We had Sequoia, Andreessen, Excel, Kleiner Perkins, and Google had 26 million of it too. Ran that for 5 years. It was acquired for $250 million by Red Hat. And I'm on the other side of that. My co-founder and I have started tinkering on some new stuff, but nothing really, it's all nascent. And I'm currently sitting on my alpaca ranch in Smoked Out, Oregon.
Smoking. Thank you. All right. So it's a pretty awesome group, I gotta say. Let's see, maybe I'll just pose and let anyone come out. Like what was the first version of your product? I don't know, let's go with Liana. How about how different is
Sure.
What you have now versus what you launched with, for at least for Switch, I guess?
So yeah, for Switch, the fundamental platform is extremely different. I mean, in the beginning, we really wanted to test it before building it out. So what we do is we rent out jewelry as a subscription. Members can keep their jewelry as long or as little as they want, kind of the way Netflix worked when they had DVDs as their primary product. And so in the beginning, we actually didn't own any of the inventory. We didn't have the inventory with us. And as soon as we got an order placed, that's when we would go run out and make sure we get that product to the customer, just to see what the appetite was. So obviously we didn't have anything automated at the time. We tried to make it look quasi-automated to the customer just to see if there was an appetite. And we also had a queue system because we may not have been able to fulfill their primary request. And so we kind of said, choose your top 3 favorite things and we'll make sure you get one of those 3. And so now we have a substantially different system where it's all automated. We obviously own all of the products that we offer, and it's a very different system. But I mean, the lesson from that is just you can be very scrappy in the beginning and it doesn't have to work the way it will work later, just to kind of see if the market is even there.
Right. Yeah, that's that whole, I see, like, do things that don't scale, just what is the minimum viable product?
Exactly. And I think we still do that with different features. Like right now we're testing a trade-in program. So we're going to start buying jewelry from the public, and we've already started doing that. We're definitely right now doing that in a way that doesn't scale, just to see whether, again, it's viable. And if it is, then we're going to kind of build it out.
Mm-hmm. How about, like, how do you find that balance? I don't know, you can answer, anybody else, just of like, it's, like, it's too much manual work, we need to automate this, or we're getting too automated and we don't know if there's any demand. Like, is there any little rules, any of you guys, of like, stop building and start selling, or stop selling and fix it? I guess, yeah, anybody?
I think you want to be careful about like how you think. Like, one of the things that comes up a lot of times is like, can you do the rollout geographically? Like maybe take a state or a part of it, a part of the country, and test something out just in that little geography, rather than doing like a full-on rollout of your unscalable solution all across the country or all across the world. So I'd say you don't want to brand yourself as like a janky website that breaks, So you want to be cautious of that. So at Yelp, we always would do like percentage experiments, roll things out slowly, like test them out, try to get feedback, iterate on the product, like continue, even if something's subscale, like you don't have customer service ramped up, or you don't have sales is fully in the loop. Like you have things that need to messaging that needs to happen around the company. And that takes time to like get through that. So
one of the things, scale always seems to be a tough thing. Like, it's always difficult to scale things, but there are advantages to scale. And one is that rolling out and studying your experiment very carefully across many different verticals or dimensions gets a lot easier with scale. And then so you can roll out something that is not going to scale to a small portion and really understand it well and put it together as fast and as scrap as you got to do. Actually, one of my favorite versions of that is something called a painted door experiment. I don't know if this is something that was kind of new to me as of a couple of years ago, but it's called a painted door experiment. It's literally as if you painted a door on your wall, and it's not a real door. You just want to see if people are going to go jiggle the knob. And that can be so there's nothing behind it. You literally just see if somebody clicks that button, and then you might say, oh, sorry, it's not working right now. But then you get to see, do people actually go and engage with your new yellow button in an extremely easy to scale way.
So I have a pair of stories. They're both Idea Lab stories that are similar to this, right? So I think one of them is kind of a famous story with cars.com to buy a car online. Right? Like, will someone buy a car online? And of course the engineer's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to figure out a way to scrape and like integrate the inventories of all the nearby dealerships so that I can show, the cars to the users and make sure that they purchase a car that exists. Right. And Bill's like, no, you don't understand. I just want to see if someone will buy a car online. And he's like, okay, well, at the very least, I'm going to need to talk to the dealerships and understand like how they're going to coordinate delivery, right? And how we're going to exchange the money online, and have to set up bank accounts and yada yada. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I just want to see if someone will buy a car online, and just basically allow them to put in credit card information and basically allow it to go through, right? I want to become I need to be able to take credit card money, and he's like, okay, I got it. Now this is weeks later when, the target of this keeps changing. And finally, so the developer comes, into Bill's office and he's like, we sold 3 cars last night. And Bill's like, okay, turn it off. right? And the idea is that I don't even know who they got to go to those dealerships and buy those cars and drive them to those people's houses. But the idea was that, you know, don't worry about the inventory, right? Don't worry about, you know, all the logistics. Don't worry about, you know, how this has to end up being, right? It's that painted door. Will someone buy a car online, right? So that's one scenario. The other one is actually, it touches on this kind of MVP thing as well, which is that, you know, way back in the day, you know, when people sort of had, you know, subscriptions to magazines, and you could put in like little ads in crafting magazines, various things that Bill would come up with, he would try to sell in these little ads, right? He would show, oh, I'll make a kit for a speaker is the example that he uses. And this kit for a speaker, you know, what he would do is he will allow, you know, 6 to 8 weeks and put in effectively that stat. So he would have 6 to 8 weeks to decide whether or not he actually felt like building these things. And if he got enough orders, he would build them and send them out. And if he didn't, then he would just send back, you know, an out of stock notice and say, oh, I'm sorry, and refund them their money, right? So it's this idea, it's exactly this painted door, which is, you know, figure out if it's something that makes sense and then figure out how to do it, right? So anyway.
All right. Hey, Alex, how about, what was the first version of CloudKick? And how,
The first
what did you want?
version of CloudKick and what I applied to Y Combinator with was called Scholarshipster, which was crowdfunded scholarships for undergrads. And we pivoted 4 times while in the incubator. And then when they finally came up with CloudKick, and I think the lesson learned there was the reason we did CloudKick was because we actually knew something about it. Like everything else, we just had no clue. And so my lesson there was like, any bit of domain expertise you have, even if it's like the tiniest little bit, is better than doing something in an area where you just have no clue. So, but yeah, we pivoted a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's something for founder market fit, not just product market fit.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Here's some questions from the audience. Solomon was saying, doesn't giving people a sorry, we can't do that reduce their trust? If you're working with a niche, can that hurt you? Although Marty already responded some, but.
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, that is an advantage of scale. You can show that one painted door experiment to one person once. And we're kind of used to in the internet having a few problems. So show it to one person, you're not going to lose their trust. You're going to gain a lot of insight and hopefully build a better product for them. But yeah, there is a quality bar. I don't mean to make it sound like you should screw with your users. You do need to maintain their trust.
And I'd also add, it depends on branding, where you stand in the market, how big you are, how many users are going to actually see that painted door, things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
early on. That's really.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
As a disciple of Paul Graham, I feel like the whole 1 unit of usefulness thing really is like, that's my preferred way versus like finding, like testing different things, like just try to provide 1 unit of usefulness and then see if you get any traction on that one little bit. You know, you can call it MVP or whatever, but it's like, I found just building something and seeing people actually want it is, you know, better than anything else.
Yeah, that is key. What ideas are you guys working on now if you're not actively working on Switch? Or what kind of ideas, like, are there pivots for Switch even? Or like, even once you feel like you have product market fit, but I assume there's still like iterations, and like you said, you're testing, what is it?
Yeah, exactly. So I touched on this a little bit before. We're just starting to test a trade-in program where the public or members can send us their jewelry and we'll either buy it from them with cash or give them months of membership purchase credit, or that, you know, we start with mine, but we realize that we have a special opportunity here because most of the time when you're working with The RealReal or Tradesy or eBay, you're waiting for a buyer to come and actually buy your product. But in this case, the company is the buyer. and we know exactly what we need, so we can buy immediately. And so we can kind of cut out that waiting period that most people have to wait until they get paid for what they want to sell. And we can actually also cut out the middleman commission fee. So we might be able to pay them higher than other platforms as well, because we're not relying on that. So we might have a really cool niche in the market where this works really well for jewelry, let's say under $1,500 or something like that.
How do you deal with risk in that kind of a situation? Like if you give out a piece of jewelry in exchange for $29 a month, you know, yeah. Go ahead, please.
So that's something we've had to be really handy about, and that's still, I think, a test. And the bigger we get, you know, there is a point that we have in our minds that if fraud passed a certain amount, then we would start maybe taking a deposit. And it hasn't passed that amount, but there are many things that we do to try and circumvent that. So one example is we run a $300 hold when somebody signs up, like a 24-hour hold, the same way when you check into a hotel, they run your credit card just to make sure it works, and they don't actually take a deposit. So we do the same thing to make sure you have funds in your account. And we've actually started doing that now with like a $1 hold every time we ship out a piece, to make sure that from last month when your credit card payment went through and it was, you know, went through properly, until this new shipment goes out, like let's say 2 weeks later, your credit card is still valid and has, and the account is open. So there are a lot of like hacks that we've learned to do. There are other things. I mean, we work with Stripe, so Stripe has their own fraud detection services. And then we've also done kind of things that we've learned from, which are like checking where people's zip codes are in relation to where they're shipping the item. And we have other flags that have come up. We kind of will ask for an ID, a picture of someone's ID if we realize something is fishy, things like that.
A good one we had at DreamHost is we asked what city they were born in. And if they put the same city as their shipping address, it was probably a stolen identity. Because almost no one, like they're just like taking a list of database of stolen stuff and just copy and pasting city, okay. And no legitimate person lives in the city they were born in, mostly.
One thing though, on these two subjects, and I had some very similar things at Reddit and Pinterest, don't sweat these details until you get success, unless your company relies on the security. So if you had a security event and the company is dead, which does exist for certain kinds of companies, don't worry about security, don't worry about spam, don't worry about fraud until you're big enough to that it's actually taking up a sizable portion of your business.
Yeah, those are nice problems to have. That's when you've got
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
These are the problems you're going to want to have to think about later because you're successful enough to have the luxury to think about them.
Yeah. And then there's still problems. Darn it.
There's also a class of problems where, like, if there's real risk to your brand, like sending out a fake piece of jewelry because someone returned a fake piece of jewelry, that like you kind of have to deal with out of the gates too. Yeah, you just have to be honest with yourself about if it actually would affect your brand. So if one piece of jewelry didn't go well, I don't know. I don't know that business so well, but yeah, you just have to be careful. You're not putting too much stock in one bad experience.
And you can always fix it for that one person, right? It's a good opportunity to like make a really, when they go on review sites and say, I got a fake jewelry, and then they returned it and they gave all my money back and it was great customer service and I'm going to use them again, Right. Like,
yeah. Let me say one thing about security is that there are just so many tools now to turn on very easily. Factor authentication on people stealing, trying to steal passwords and stuff. So the second factor thing for all your employee laptops and then full disk encryption is just so easy. If you don't do that, it's just like, you're just missing the boat. So, and it takes 6 to 12 months to do it as a big company. Trust me.
Yeah. What ideas you guys have for startups right now? Alex, maybe.
Yeah, there was one question I saw up there about 10 people. How do you hire, build 10 people? And from Michael, I thought maybe I could take that one because I had some thoughts on it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I've found that having a team is definitely useful. But what's worked really well for me is this whole strategy. I call it rent plus wages up front. So like I use my network and find as many people as I can that will work for rent plus, which is essentially a salary that is their rent plus a little bit more, in exchange for large equity stakes. So like give them large equity stakes. And I found, I'm a pretty well networked person at this point and whatnot, but it still can only round up like 10, maybe 20 people tops at that level because people just need to pay, for things, which is totally reasonable. I'm not against that, but I just say up front, able to find folks that are willing to essentially take equity, so take risk for bigger in exchange for, working on a salary that could be supported off of, a little bit of funding, but that does limit your pool of people to actually go after. And I also just don't feel like you should hire too many people too fast in general, just because it costs so much money and will create overhead quickly. So I think one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur much is him. I like to be generous. I think I gave my first employee 5 points. And then I'd say at the end of my like rent plus wage program, which was sort of pre any meaningful investment in the company, probably the minimum was like a point. So the first 5 to 10-ish employees all had somewhere between 1 to 5 points, I'd say. That was sort of thing. And what was really fun when our company was acquired for $50 million, a lot of people made a lot of money, and it's really fun to like do that and reward people for their hard work and taking the risk early on. It's great. It's like kind of the way it should work, so.
Especially since those early people take on a lot of the dilution.
Yeah, I mean, again, on my second go around, was able to effectively avoid dilution quite a bit. And so one question, that 5%, I think they probably left with 2 or 3 points, I bet, at the end. Yeah, something like that. But
so dilution's an interesting point that I think should be mentioned, because a lot of people starting companies assume that venture money is the only option available to them. And something that's amazing is just getting loans, whether it's from Clearbank or other things, depending on whether your company already has revenue. And so those are great options that I think more founders should be looking into early on.
Yeah, and go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to bring up a view about equity with like my first company. Essentially, for $2 million, I sold like half the company, so I had like no idea what I was doing from like my first finance I ever did as like a 23-year-old was $750K on a $1.5 million pre-money. Okay, so I sold a third company for $750K with like a preference stack and all this stuff. On CoreOS, I still feel like equity, I personally love equity over debt because like it's literally made up. Like I just went down to the state of Delaware and printed up some stocks and then I sold it to people. Like it's just like, God bless America. That's the craziest thing in the world to me, even still. But it's like, it's kind of made up, and I like everybody winning together. That said, one thing to really think about is that preference stack. Like that's actually where you can get hurt in terms of the dilution mattering, especially if you're raising at decent valuations. So it's like we had 50 million in funding from CoreOS, but we were all 1x non-participating, which means the investors just got their money back if they didn't get any multiple on that. And so they get a multiple based on their pro rata ownership, but like if an investor had a really big stake at a high valuation, while it's not seen as the most sexy thing in Silicon Valley to like get a $200 million valuation and sell the company to $250 million, it's really great for the employees and the common shareholders to do that because you essentially got like a free ride from Silicon Valley. So anyway, my counterpoint is just I like equity because it's made up.
You mentioned that you avoided a lot of dilution on your second startup. Is that, or how did you go about that? Similar to the way Liana did, or?
Yeah. I mean, so confidential among founders here, and I don't know who's in here, so please be good. It's like, essentially, raising is a little bit of like, I would not recommend like, I guess overall I'm saying dilution doesn't really matter, so it's okay. Don't do anything super stupid. But even in my first company, I sold half the company for 750K, like, or whatever. It worked out, you know. And the other end of the spectrum, I was optimizing it completely, and it was like I did 150K from friends and family. Three friends got a 50K checks in it, like evaluation I gave them, essentially $5 million, and it was almost like a thank you for them helping me in my first company. Then the next wave was where I was teeing up all my Series A investors by letting them invest. So I had Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins competing over about 250K allocation into my company. And I was able to like get that to, like, I wanted them both in because I wanted them competitive, but then that valuation didn't really matter because I wasn't raising that much. It was just like 250K or 400K, something like that. And it was just very, like, not selling much of the companies. The valuation that pops out the other end kind of doesn't really matter. Like $5 to $10 million, so if it's only 400K, it's not going to be a lot again. And then in the Series A, now I have competitive environment there. And again, I would always trade just less money. I would just say, give me less money. So instead of worrying about higher valuations, I would just say, give me less money. You know, because they're all trying to get 20% or whatever they need to be a Series A investor. And I would try to just ratchet that down. Like my negotiation was always on that. It was just like, get their ownership stake, you know, to be lower by it. And I'm okay trading less money for that versus trading higher valuation. But again, I'm not necessarily evangelizing that approach. I'd say that's a little bit, I don't know. I feel like I was my sophomore year in Silicon Valley, so I was doing it, you know, a little sharper around the block. I knew how to work the locker and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't avoid taking more money for more dilution. Also, if I just really needed it to work, I was just sort of playing Silicon Valley a little bit because I got played the first time, you know.
But you also have more street cred at that point, so
yeah, 100%
quite effectively. It sounds like you did.
It's all about leverage. From my first talk, you want more people buying what you're selling or more people selling what you're buying.
Well, the last point on equity and investors that I will bring up is about what is control. Like I always heard like control, you got to make sure you maintain control. And that was just one thing I never really learned about until later. And control could be board control, which is a common one. Like I have more seats than the other people, but then there can be control like, oh, I need to have 51% stock. I found that one doesn't matter ever. The only really control that I found matters is when you take a preferred investor, they get to decide if you raise another round or sell the company. And that control really matters because if you're in a situation where you're distressed later, they can essentially say, you're not going to raise from anybody and like jam you down and do weird things to you. Or they could say, you're not going to sell the company, instead you're going to take my investment, and then like it's your only option. And I fortunately never had that stuff happening, but could see the writing on the wall. So if it's control, it's about that preferred voting right on selling and selling stock of any security. So anyway, that's my last comment on VCs.
Well, one thing, I don't know, we can keep talking to the group, but I also just wanted to, maybe we're going to break out. So it's each of these illustrious guest speakers will be in their own breakout room with randomly assigned people. So it's about 25 in each of them. So we can do more parallel processing. Does this sound good? Thumbs up. Last chance to ask a question of the whole group. Cool. Oh yeah, go Alex. What do you think?
What do we do?
What do you do?
Like, are we moderating a discussion?
Just more of this. Like people are gonna just ask you stuff. It's like the talk's over now. Everyone's rushing up to you at the podium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's that's what this is. And feel free. I mean, it goes till 2:30, but I'm not going to close the room, or but the guests can definitely leave. But whatever. So I'm going to try this. And thanks, everybody. Can you request a specific group? Yeah, you can message me. I'll move you around. Whatever. We'll see how it goes. But I'm starting out random. Okay.
We're not coming back after this, so stay in your groups.
Yeah, we're not coming back. That's Maluz when she's like 5. All right. Opening all rooms. Oh. Karen, which room you want to be in? You're the only one who wasn't here when I was assigning them. I'm going to assign you to one of them. number 2. I'm assigning myself. Am I? Which room am I in? Am I in a room? Hello? John, what's happening? Which room are we in? Are we in the no room? I want to go into one.
How long do they remain a customer in terms of months? And what are you doing to increase it? So that's a bunch of questions in one.
Yeah, of course. Happy to answer. So on the customer acquisition side, about 50% of our members are come through referrals. So we do have a refer a friend program where we give $25. Originally, we used to be giving $50. And it was really working. So we tested whether $25 would work kind of the same, and it did, and we were giving away less money, so we switched. And so that was definitely extremely successful, and we're still using that. Another program that we do is work with influencers, but that's really complicated, and we've tried a bunch of things. So the best thing is there is this tool called Hype Auditor that we've used to kind of measure influencers in terms of geographically where their followers are based, to see kind of their age group, how many bots are following them, like how much of their following is real. And we usually work with them on Instagram, and we reach out directly to them and kind of come up with a dollar amount that works. And then if they're successful, we might do a second or third round with them as well. So that's been pretty effective. Something that I can say has not been very effective is like the influencer agencies where they connect you to influencers. I've generally seen much much higher CAC with those models, and just not as many people converting overall in general. And then there is just direct advertising, which we generally do on like Google Ads and Instagram. Just so you guys know, like tricks of the trade, video on Instagram generally has lower CAC than like photos. So that's still optimized for lowest CAC, I think, on Instagram, and that's what we do the most of. Let's see, what else is there? There are things like Pinterest. Pinterest we've dabbled in, but it's definitely not a main source of kind of advertising. And then you asked a second question about retention. So our retention is right now, it's about 1.5 years. And we have 3 different types of members. We have gold, platinum, and black. Gold members can borrow 1 piece at a time, platinum borrow 2 pieces at a time, and black can borrow 3. And those can be any pieces from the collection. So whether it's a $2,000 bracelet or a $100 pair of earrings, those kind of all count in the same category, which is a decision that we made because of pricing. Like that's also a side note, like pricing is extremely important, and having pricing be simple is also very important. Netflix has really been a model for us in how to do that. Especially, like I said, their DVD kind of program in the beginning when they started. But retention in general, so a big trick that we had for retention, I won't go into our exact customer acquisition costs, but a big trick that we had for retention is we actually give away $5 to $10 every single month to every member in purchase credit. So that really, like, it was one lever that when we changed that, our retention, just skyrocketed, which was amazing to see, because I think with rentals, it's not that people feel that they're wasting money, but when you're spending money every month and then you don't get to keep anything at the end, we realized that psychologically people want to have some level of equity in the thing that they're spending money on. And so we started with actually a $10 a month purchase credit, which can be used to purchase any item that's available. And then we actually changed it to proportionally depending on basically how much revenue you're giving us.
And then just one follow-up question real quick. Do you ever take customers at a loss, or you're always taking customers at profit?
So that's a tricky question. We almost always take customers at a profit. What I've noticed from friends who are entrepreneurs in the consumer space as well is when you give like a free trial, for example, I'd rather never give a real free trial and have them pay, even if it's 50% off or 80% off, have them pay something, put their credit card information and make sure that they've paid for something. Because sometimes when you do the free trials, you're optimizing for the wrong kind of customer. And even if that customer does convert, they're not going to be as good of a customer as the customers you get who originally were willing to pay something upfront. But taking customers at a loss, I guess if their customer acquisition cost is very high and they only stick around for 1 month, we definitely take customers on a loss, you know, in that way. But the loss is very minimal and it's worth it overall, because you should really look at your cohorts rather than are you taking this one customer on a loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had a similar thing in DreamHost where we gave away essentially a year of web hosting, but you still had to pay for your domain registration. So you still at least had to pay $10 and you got a whole year free and like 35% renewed, which we were expecting like 5% to renew or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that also goes to show you're offering a good product, right?
I guess so.
The product does have something to do with it too. It's not all hacks.
Right. It's not just CAC LTV.
Yeah, exactly. The LTV comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
When you first started out, how did you reach out to people to ask for help, ask for advice? Because you didn't know everything about everything. So, like, how did you approach people that were that you needed help from, and you only needed like I guess 10, 15 minutes of their time?
Yeah. So first,
in my experience, I don't outsource, and in my experience, I don't patent things. So I don't think outsourcing really works because it requires capital to pay for things, and then just at early stage, you don't have any money, and then also you're building like a product. So I found that sort of really having an intimate relationship with software and the product is super important. And then we don't do patents. That's sort of a philosophical thing. Okay, what steps would you take right after your first round of funding? So just that reminded me of a funny story. When we raised our Series A, a lot of people celebrate the Series A, but I see the Series A more as like a way, setting the dinner table. So instead of holding a big party for the company, I hired a mobile knife sharpener to come to the office, and everybody could bring their kitchen knives in to get sharpened, because it's time to sharpen the tools, and get to work. But that was something we literally did. But all seriousness, I mean, after you raise the initial amount of money, it's like, it really starts a hiring blitz is the main thing that it allows at the early stages. You can actually start hiring people. And I'd say beyond just that first initial, this incubator stage and everything, the job really does shift to hiring if you raise any meaningful amount of capital, and getting really good at hiring is a skill to definitely hone in and develop. Then the next question was, well, related, what steps do you take just before the first round of funding? Yeah, I mean, speaking to Cloud Cake, kind of talk about that a little bit, but that was just pitching, 40 pitches or so before we got someone to say yes, and that was a slog, and we thought we were gonna have to give up like every other day. So the worst roller coaster ever. What do you prioritize in co-founders? Great question. So my first company, they were guys from Oregon State that I knew, but wasn't like super close with, but I knew that they were like, hung out, they were in our class and like that kind of stuff. And I've been really fortunate that I haven't had any founder issues in terms of like founder breakups or like anything like that. I think it's just willingness to really be able to work together. And like, I think there's some level of having a pre-existing relationship that's really important. In a way, you're getting married to these people. So kind of finding someone you've never worked with before, then going through the trauma that is starting an early stage startup, I think would be pretty tough. So with my second company, CoreOS, that was with my friend from my lifelong best friend that we've been, we sat next to each other since freshman year in computer science class or whatever, and known him forever. And then in the CloudKick, my first company, it was also people I knew from school. And I just say having a pre-existing relationship and knowing that you're kind of compatible, I've found to be really important. And that has not gone sideways on me yet. But founder breakups are a leading cause of startup death. That's for sure. Okay.
But to find out where you are in line, you have to download the Yelp app. So it's like a give and take for the Yelp app distribution. Another thing is okay, so you have the influencers, or you have like this offline distribution strategy. Another thing is just get a list of we used to go to pre-pandemic, in 2005 Yelp, we would go to all these fairs and just collect people's email addresses, give out swag. We had lip balms, we had sweatbands, and just create, you create on-brand swag for your brand. And then we collected email addresses, created this thing called the Weekly Yelp that would highlight local businesses in your area. And then Yelp also would throw events that were sponsored by these businesses that wanted to get the foot traffic. So it's just getting out there in the public, collecting email addresses beyond your employees or beyond contractors that you use to seed the content. And it depends on what kind of site you have at Yelp. One of Yelp's distribution strategies when Yelp was launching a new city, they'd pay a set of contractors to write the first 0.01% of content. So if you're in Philadelphia, you can't launch the site without the Liberty Bell, right? So you have to have someone write that first, upload the photo of the Liberty Bell. Otherwise it looks like a piece of shit, right? So you have to get that first layer of content of let's say the head 10,000 businesses. And then the rest of the content can be written by everyone else. But you can't have a barren site with no photos, with no users, with no life, and expect people to use it. So you have to either, that's the magic of what ByteDance did with TikTok is ByteDance was an incredible user acquisition machine. TikTok was actually a spin out, or it was there was a company in LA called something, I want to say Soundly or Music. Oh, it was called Musical.ly. Musical.ly was bought by TikTok and then bought by ByteDance. But ByteDance was the user acquisition machine, and they took TikTok took this Musical.ly app and turned it into this monster. But the monster was not obvious, right? It took this the user acquisition was actually the challenge. And so ByteDance coming in with billions of dollars, spending it on Facebook, actually that's what actually booted up the app. And there's something that Musical.ly did, or there's something that happened with how they got all the influencers to start building really high quality video content for TikTok that really got it going. Because I think content creators, depending on what you're building, content creators took a while to adapt to this new format that was TikTok, right? So that was a rambling answer around a bunch of different important topics. So hopefully you got what you wanted.
Definitely, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Other questions out there? No question is off limits.
I got one more question for you, Michael, if no one else has got anything. Question, as Yelp was growing and you were responsible for development, how did you prioritize your development team with respect to maintenance and fixing the current site versus innovating in new features or hooks for your users. And maybe this ties in a little bit to some of the marketing acquisition that you were just talking about too.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the speeches I give to early stage founders is that you don't have a team unless you have 4 people. You have one person that's on vacation, one person's fixing bugs, one person's working on new features, and then one person's probably getting fired. So you have to have like 4 people. You have to have 4 people on any team to like push forward, like typically on a team. And if you know, in a startup environment, this 4 becomes like 2, where you're working really double shifts. So you work 14 hours a day, right? And like, you can only do that for like 4 years before you like need to do a meditation retreat, right? So it's like you're burning for hopefully a lot of equity that's worth something, or like the glory, right? But you work double time, right? And then hopefully over time you can work less. But you know, a lot of startup folks work just endlessly. And so you paper over the need for 4 people. You do it with 2 or 1. So the balance, so I'd say you don't want to get into a position where you have like 2 on fire things. Like, let's say you have a deal with Apple and you have a deadline for the Apple, you know, September 15th, you're launching with the new AirPods, and like they need you in Cupertino to work on their device, and like you just don't have an engineer to work on it. It's like, that's the worst. And then simultaneously you have a production, like I imagine you're doing headphones, so that's why I thought of headphones in the background. I see that cab in the background.
Yeah, our helmets.
Yeah, oh, the helmet, sorry. And you have a production line issue wherever you're manufacturing, and like some machine is broken and you need to deploy some engineer to that, and it's the same engineer, right? Going to both. Then you're on fire. You're just like, what do I do? I'm screwed. Like, I'm now ripping the company apart, doing like each thing is critical, and like you just have no solution. You don't want to.
The cool area, if you're interested, right now I'm interested in woodworking. I found a woodworking place. And so what we wanted to do, the vision was to build a place where people could find those places and feel safe doing them. So that was another big key in the vision statement. You have to be able to go to these places and not feel like someone's going to harass you. And unfortunately, you know, the phrase, this goes back to that problem of why branding is important. People say, oh, that kind of bad shit happens because it's Reddit. And we got past that. That used to be far more prevalent. But the reality is, no, bad shit happens whenever you put more than, say, 100 people together in the same area, especially if you don't have their faces or you're not in person. Even if you have 3 people, if they have to communicate by text, they will eventually, you know, start coming to blows. There's a Key and Peele episode that everybody should watch that I actually show in my talks on how to build effective communication. And it's Key and Peele, they're a comedy duo, and they're talking over SMS. And one guy says, hey, you want to meet tonight? And, you know, casually, jokingly. And the other guy says, you want to meet tonight? What? You know, and it starts getting pissed off. And they keep having this back and forth where one is just so super nice and jovial, and the other is just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And finally they meet each other and they see each other in person, and they're like, oh, wait, I misunderstood. The one guy actually brought in like a weapon with him. But it is so perfect to, I think, what Reddit's up against, which is how do you build effective empathy between 10,000 people. And so the real vision I have for Reddit, still, I'm not there anymore, but the vision I hope that it one day can achieve is a place where anybody can find their home, their interest, their people, their tribe, their whatever they're looking for, and not be afraid to interact. And it's not there yet. It's still very hard.
Yeah, makes sense.
Fun stuff. Yeah, very stressful.
I mean, it's a worthwhile, that's a goal worth, you know, working towards, I think.
Yeah, that's the way I kind of saw it. And one thing about Reddit at that stage is I could play it more like chess rather than, you know, what Pinterest and Reddit in the beginning were, which is more of a game of lottery, which is a whole nother, it kind of jumps back to what Josh was talking about MVPs and things, but that's a whole different subject.
Apologies, like unless someone else has something, I guess I'm just wondering, like, did you find that, I don't know, as you're trying to monetize parts of Reddit, I know I see ads sometimes, but I also see that brands will create their own, subreddits to try and engage a community around what they're building or what they're doing. Did you find that people were reluctant to work with Reddit at first and you had to build that trust back, or?
Yes, for several reasons. The first was we didn't have a proper platform for buying ads. It was this bizarre thing. So I hired a director out of Google, and he was one of my first big hires. And I basically said, hey, can you please go make ads not suck, and I'll see you later. And he did. He basically took on that job, and then we started building out the product team around it all. And now it's, a 200-person team. But we had to make a proper platform where you could buy ads that could actually do auctions, that could weed out fraud and all this other stuff. So that was the first part. And then the second part is, I think, what you're getting a little bit into, which is also the brand. I think Tumblr sold to Yahoo for $1 billion. I think it was worth $20 billion if they didn't have porn all over the place and weird stuff. And so it was key for Reddit, even though Reddit has some of that stuff, we had to build that trust that you're not going to see Coca-Cola next to bigotry or Coca-Cola next to porn or whatever it's going to be. And so that was something we had to build out, is that capability that we could show ads in an extremely targeted, safe way, and then convince the companies that we had that. So that took years, but we eventually got there.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Makes sense.
So I've got a question. So you've, Marty, you've been fortunate to be sort of part of, call it 2 hits, right? Two wins, right? Mm-hmm. And there's people that, or I mean, at least 2, right? So, but there's people that can go like an entire career really and only be part of losers, right? And that happens all the time, right? That's probably more common than not. And so, as someone that's been a part of like these crazy wins, from the inside, when did you sort of know that it was some crazy win? Like, clearly you have perceived something, or maybe now in hindsight there's something you perceived at the time that where you're like, oh shit, there's something here, or like this is a big deal, or this is we've got this. Like, can you
I would love to answer your question. Yeah, I'd love to answer your question, also backing up a few steps to a question that I think is important to talk about, which is it's a little related to pivoting, but I have started and scuttled, well, to varying degrees, about 20 some odd companies. And it was from my dad's advice. He said, it doesn't matter if you fail 20 times, if on the 21st you succeed, you've won, right? And a 22nd win is not so bad either. But the first one was Pinterest, and it, what is this? Oh, okay. Just a message from Josh. With Pinterest, we got lucky, and and that was what I was looking for. I was rolling the dice until it was a 20-sided dice, and finally it ended up on the number 7, which is what I was looking for. And with Pinterest, I knew it on a couple of months in, when I wasn't sleeping, and I realized there's something here, and that was actually motivation for me to keep working on it, because I thought this is one of those rare tickets to something big, and I think that's where I knew it was happening with that. With the others, I just never saw traction. I built a lot of startups, and there's this big question about when you pivot. And the way I sort of think about it is, if there's 2 different worlds of startups or early companies. One is lottery, and that's consumer. So, you pay for a ticket, you try it out, and does the world care about your thing? Yes or no? And you're going to find out. And it's mostly luck. But if you are lucky enough to hit it, you've got to hold on to it. And the other one is chess, which is you're building an enterprise app because you know that people in startups they have a hard time holding on to their metric data, because nothing will scale. So you're going to build a thing and sell it to them for X amount, and they're going to be happier. And that's a little bit easier to kind of play the game of chess early on. But with consumer lottery sites, you've got to start with, hope that you win the lottery. And then if you do, you start to turn it as best as you can into a game of chess. So I leveraged my growth at Pinterest and my success to be a chess game for Reddit. Reddit was very much a chess move. I saw that they were, you want to buy your stocks when they're low, not when they're high. And Reddit was a thing that was worth 500 million that could be worth 12 billion if it just had decent insights. So that one was just that one I wouldn't even call a second piece of lightning. That was just a chess move.
I guess I kind of want to ask a question in that line. It seems like people that start with startups stick with startups, and typically career paths might urge people to continue doing the fail until you succeed and whatnot. And I'm kind of curious, what's, you know, an investor has a really vested interest to make sure their incubatees grow up and survive and thrive, and set up incubators like this. And I'm curious, like, for those that are not necessarily interested in a career path, they just have the one problem they want to solve, you know, does that mean you have a lower chance of succeeding, or does that mean, you know, you're doomed to spend a couple years on an idea that has like the 1 in 10 chance of succeeding? You know, what's your take on that?
Well, if you succeed, you're going to have the problem that even though you like small startups, which is what I like, you're going to have to grow, and it's going to turn into a, you know, 500 person or 1,000 person or a 2,000 person thing. And suddenly you're going to find yourself either having to grow with it or extremely uncomfortable. Or you can be the dream of all Silicon Valley people, and that's the non-executing founder, the one who's not the CEO, maybe is the CTO, or maybe just doesn't even have a title, who gets to enjoy the ride. That is a sweet gig. I wish I had enjoyed that gig. If you succeed, you're going to have to grow out of it. And if you don't like it, there are a lot of people who sadly don't make it along the ride. Most founders usually find a place, but some of them do exit if they're just not comfortable with it. If you fail, I think the key is that, you know, that you want to try to roll the dice as many times as you can, because every time you roll, it's another chance. So there's kind of, I don't know if you're alluding to this, or there's kind of a separate part of this question, which is, how do you know when to give up on a startup, which I think is the key question. With consumer, where it is a lottery, the best answer I can give, because if I had the right answer, I'd probably be a billionaire right now. But the best I could ever muster was, you got to give it enough time to see if it works. You got to build that MVP and then see if there's something. But usually 6 to 9 months, if you ain't seeing traction, I don't know what's going to do it. There's probably exceptions to that rule, but it's something to consider. I've had some startups that exploded for a good couple of weeks, and I was really excited, but I never actually saw that exponential, you know, one person turns into 1.1 on those startups. We saw that at Pinterest, but I never saw it with some of the things I built. And unless you see that, you've got to keep the timer going, and then at some point, you got to jump ship. I mean, maybe it's your baby, and maybe you're so passionate you want to keep going, but you got to keep in mind that you may spend 4 years on something that's just never going to go anywhere. And I think that, again, if it's something you're passionate about, fine. But if you're purely going for, you know, a growth success story, that's the biggest failure. You can fail fast, you can succeed, but don't fail slow. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'd love to hear if Josh or other folks have some other ideas on this, but I generally tell people, if you're not seeing something within 9 months, that's a long time to give to it, and it may be time to move on. Mm-hmm. But you should also give it some time. I mean, sometimes it takes the right set of features that you haven't quite added, and a little bit of time to get it to the thing you want to build.
Yeah, I think so failing slow that's a tough one, right? And I think that one's a really hard one to navigate. And if you haven't navigated it before, or you haven't seen it from a different perspective, like, that one can surprise you. You know, one of the things about, like, you know, when do you stop, right? I think that there's a nugget there, which is sometimes money forces you to stop, right? And a slow sort of quote unquote failure, you know, there's just enough money, right? And you're like, okay, well, you know, I don't have to stop. Right. And I already have momentum, and things are going okay. You know, next month could be better. Right. That kind of thing will kind of keep you going. But, like, if you're like in sales, sort of in like the, you know, in a sales department, you know, in a sales role, you know, a fast yes and a fast no, like, those two things are first and second place. You want those things, a fast yes and a fast no. A slow no is terrible. And honestly, a slow yes can sometimes kill you too. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, if you think about that, and, like, when you quit, like, those things are a big deal. And I think your original question, John, was talking about, talking about sort of becoming kind of like, a startup lifer or not, or, having one passion or having lots of at bats, right? So
yeah, there's a lot
Marty,
of
you were talking about dice rolls,
you've been at
right?
5 startups, Josh has been at 1 billion, you've been at 10, you've been at 20. I never meet people that are like, yeah, I've just been at 1 startup.
Yeah, no, it's out there. It exists. I'd say that to think that you're gonna cast your entire path out now and you're going to become a startup person, or you're going to become some Fortune 500 office drone, or you're gonna become whatever, like you have no idea. Like honestly, I think that you're probably ascribing maybe too much to call it planning and strategy and sort of career mapping and all of those things. It's like, no. It's, you have a plan until you get hit in the face. And
everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face.
Exactly, right? So you have a plan and then you get hit in the face and then you have to make it up as you go along, right? That's kind of that's adulthood. When you're a kid, you think that everyone that's a little bit older than you has it all worked out. And then you become that age and you're like, man, those people were clueless.
Yeah.
And then, but you're like, no, but these other people that are a little bit further ahead of me, they have it all figured out. And then you become that age and those people are clueless. And the reality is that we're all just trying to figure it out.
You sort of have to evaluate it from like, at any point in time, like evaluate your options. And it's sort of everything you've done today is a sunk cost. And you just sort of say, do you have better opportunities versus what's the realistic probability that this company is successful? The other thing is like, you can play a portfolio approach. If you stick at a company over a year, you can vest some options and you always have those options. And then you can go to the next company and then you have maybe 3 or 4 of them. And, there are some technical challenges, right? Sometimes you have to buy the options, which takes some cash. But
real pain, yeah.
You could do 4 companies for a year each and you've got 4 chips in the game.
Yeah.
You probably, and frankly, every time you move, you probably get a bigger title and pay. So there is a benefit to moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, either you run out of money and that's when you quit, or someone else takes your exact idea and builds it better than you could. So.
No. You push on it hard. Don't care that anybody else out there has one. Just try to build it as best as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you do have an excuse and you want to get out, and
sure.
Don't feel too much pressure to. I do like the idea of trying to do great by your investors, but they, I don't know how to say this without sounding too cynical. They don't care about you that much. So don't be way over worried about making them whole. Just, do your best and then get to your dreams.
Sure.
How about one more question that I think I need to bail and go take care of some kiddos. I got 3 of them.
Yeah, Marty, I have a quick question on kind of technical debt. You talked about building great companies and teams, but especially when you're trying to move fast at an early stage and break things and iterate, it's hard not to accumulate technical debt. And I've seen like CTOs left my recent company, and also the data storage, there's a lot of issues. How do you kind of streamline that process, especially at an early stage?
So there's a strategy that I use to address what we should be working on technical debt, because you'll find PMs, they want to build product. And a lot of them, I love PMs, but a lot of them do not understand that there is engineering behind what goes on. They just want the thing built and they want the next thing. And they don't want you to spend 2 weeks on something that doesn't deliver product value, because why are my engineers doing that, quote unquote, if I were a PM? So what I've done to help guide the right groups to work on the right things is I help ahead of time during planning. We talk about what percentage we're going to spend on product, what percentage we're going to spend on quality, and what percentage we're going to spend on moonshot. Now, moonshot at a startup, the whole startup is moonshot. So forget about that. That's more for when you get bigger and you're like, well, we'd like to spend 10% on some risk. So like Reddit at this stage should be spending some percentage of its money because it's in the right position to do so on some pie in the sky crazy stuff. Because maybe one of those will hit, maybe one will be a Gmail. But forget that. What percentage is going to be product and what percentage is going to be quality? And the great thing is you build, by starting up front and setting expectations on where we're going to go, you can say, hey, look, we're establishing some product debt, some technical debt. It's going to slow us down later, but boy, we really need to get to this product. maybe the right thing right now is we do 80% product at 20% quality. And that will at least help everybody to understand up front what our goal is and have a discussion. Because otherwise they'll talk about it every day. Like this is again to the vision. You set the vision, you all discuss it up front. And then if an engineer wants to work on, fixing the database because it's slow, maybe there's a fire and that's important, but hopefully then you can say, well, wait a minute, we agreed up front that what we really need to be doing as a whole company, not just, individual teams, but as a whole, is that we would be working on a lot of product because we really need to get some product out the door. Now, early on, almost all of it should be product because you're just trying to prove that, is this thing actually going to work? Does anybody care? Quality, you should accrue technical debt. You should not worry about technical debt, but you should watch it and you should look at the effects of it. So one of the effects on technical debt at Reddit was it made hiring new employees just death because they would come into all this technical debt and it took them 6 weeks or something crazy to become effective. It should be a week. It should be half a week. You should be able to be effective that day. Not quite, but something like that. And that's why services are so key. So think of technical debt in the larger, grander picture as your company hits traction and what goal you're trying to solve. And you can actually really break it down. You can talk to your engineers and make a goal of, we should be spending 60% of our time on systematic work and 40% on fighting fires. But we'd really like to get to 70%. Or you could talk to your engineers and say, well, how much time do you think you spend trying to wade through the technical debt? So at Reddit, we had this problem where people said, well, not only does it take 6 weeks to build something that should take 3 days, and I'm not kidding about that, they said it's highly unpredictable. So I can tell you 6 weeks, but it also might be 4 weeks or it might be 8 weeks. So my goal was to make it faster to develop, so the velocity of effective engineering, as well as really get good at predicting when something will come out, because that's how you build trust between your teams. That's why deadlines are important. I know a lot of engineers hate deadlines, but it's why they're so damn important, is building trust between all your teams and turning the whole company into a perfect rotating, set of gears where everything is transitioning between stages like clockwork. And I've got a whole chapter of a book on that alone because it's so important. But I think that the key is to be thoughtful on what the technical debt pain is causing you. That technical debt on its own is not a bad thing. I mean, if you got business value out of it. Does that answer the question? I just always try to bring people's focus back to the goal and the problem at hand, and then work back.
Awesome. Yeah, it does. Thank you for the answer.
Do you have a more direct, like right now, are you experiencing that in your in a startup or?
Yeah, it's just, I think a lot of the code is not well documented, and I don't think the storage solutions, there's also privacy that I see as a potential issue in the future. And privacy, especially we're a machine learning based team. So like machine learning, there's a Google paper on technical debt. So yeah, those are the concerns currently.
So I would carefully come back to first principles on this and say, well, what is the product you're building, and do you need to get more product built, or is it worth investing a little bit in your future by attacking some of this technical debt now, and what will that actually give you in terms of return? So would documentation make it so your onboarding is easier, or make it so that there's fewer mistakes, or make it so that it's easier for engineers to move fluidly between source bases? It's sort of the classic thing about, should I add more tests? And the reason to add more tests is to increase your developer velocity. And you can measure developer velocity in many different ways. It is hard, but you might want to start by measuring the problem and really getting clear about what you're trying to solve. And then, I don't know if you're on are you the founder?
No, I'm just working at a Series A startup.
Okay, but then yes, if you want to present like to a manager or to a director, the way I'm most receptive to these kind of things is to say, well, here's the problem. I think we're facing, and I think it's causing us to go at 20% speed. So is it worth it to you for us to spend a week, lay out what you would build? So if I had 2 weeks, I could increase developer velocity by about 10%. Then that's something that they can then present to the CEO or whatever and start to build a plan around that. Because ultimately, it's a business decision. Am I as the CEO going to spend 5 people on growth, or 5 people on increasing my the speed of building things in the future? And that's something that that person has to make a decision on. So you need to help them make that decision.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I wanted to piggyback on that, because Marty, that was awesome. And I feel like not enough people sort of deal with that sort of from a place of having really been there. So the nuggets that I wanted to add is like one, Marty, you touched at the beginning, which is to just call out explicitly. So in this sprint, we are explicitly doing this much of product and this much. And so if explicitly you literally say 100% this and 0% this, everybody that's in the room has just agreed to do that, right? And then there's like, so then, you know, down the road, we say, hey, look, everybody agreed to do that, right? We made that choice to not work on this. And to do that explicitly means that, you know, there's no surprises.
Proper prioritization should hurt.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so another piece there too is, you know, when do you, particularly at a startup, particularly very early stage, when do you think about that technical debt? And I think one piece is that, you know, if you're trying lots of different things, right, like trying them on for size and seeing if they're sticky, you know, you don't necessarily want to invest a whole lot in technical debt for something that might end up getting cut entirely, right? So, you know, if you're going to correct that debt, it's got to be that thing needs to be a keeper, right? Or else, honestly, it doesn't matter that much. And then the last one, and this is where you ended up, Marty, is that, you know, you're not the founder, right? You're maybe not an executive or a leader or whatever, but you're trying to make a case for something. And I heard you touch on privacy as being one of the areas that's a little iffy. Well, you know, if there is really significant risk or really significant pain or really significant downsides to whatever it is that's going on, and you feel like you're the only one that's seeing that, just psychologically, people will react to avoiding risk in a way that people will, in a different way than they will to sort of seeing an advantage, right? If you take something from someone, like psychologically, it should be the same as not giving them that thing, but it's not.
Yeah,
and
people
so,
will assume that bad things don't happen.
that's right. And so if you can clearly articulate and illustrate the pain or the potential pain or the risk of continuing on the current path, you're going to get a lot more ears, a lot more bent ears, and a lot more attention, rather than if you just say, hey, look, you guys, this isn't good, or we might be able to do it better, or, you know, I bet we could do this faster, right? So you have to really paint sort of the alternative to what you're suggesting, and do that in a way that gets attention. And so
also,
anyway, Marty, that was awesome.
Oh, thank you. That's good to hear. It's helpful. I would also add, piggyback on what you just said, a really interesting outcome if you start to go down this path is your gut is that privacy debt may be accrued, and that maybe something should be done about it. But if you build out a strategy and really carefully think about it, I've had these times where I looked at my own strategy and I was like, nope, I'm wrong. So there may be a chance that you actually convince yourself that it's not the right thing. And I think a great strategy can do that sometimes. You might say, yes, privacy is important. Yes, 100%, but maybe we should be spending our time on product, and privacy is something that we can leave for a later date. That might be one interesting outcome.
Yeah, it just seems like no one wants to pay for privacy. They want to pay for the revenue. What the factors that drive their revenue.
Yeah, and that is something you should watch for. As a CEO, I would really like to not have to deal with security, and I would like to not have to deal with privacy, and I'd like to not have to deal with legal stuff, because that's just getting in the way, and nothing bad is ever going to happen, right? So that's where you do get that's where you need an effective, say like a good CISO, a good effective chief security officer and a receptive CEO. If the CEO is not receptive, you have a problem to begin with, but to paint that picture of where the right risk versus reward, because it's very hard for a CEO to say, I should hire, I've got one head to hire, maybe. I'm going to spend that one head on a potential security problem, or I'm going to spend that one head on getting another 1% growth, because I know through past experience how to do that. And that's where, that's why a strategy and a product strategy and taking everything into account is so very important at the executive level, and why it really helps to have the engineers and the managers being able to speak that language. And it's hard because a lot of times we're not taught that stuff. I didn't learn that stuff until I was about 3 years into Pinterest, and I realized that I was not scaling with Pinterest. I was still thinking like an individual, and that was my kick in the butt. And yeah. Anyway, let me drop you guys my email. I'm not sure who has it, but if you guys are experiencing some of the stuff, I'm trying to write this book. It's so slow going, but the book is on the subject of growing your engineering from zero to IPO. And if you guys are hitting an area that I happen to have written a chapter, I'd love to throw it your way and get your feedback.
Can I do one quick one before you head out? You get your kids. Knowing what you know, starting Monday, would you create, or would your next startup idea, would you tackle doing it better, something already out there, or try something that's like filling in a gap that nobody's filling?
Ooh.
Which way would you?
That's a fun question. I love to build stuff. I build droids and I build all sorts of random stuff. In fact, my biggest fear right now is to succeed on another startup because I need a break.
Me too.
Yeah. I figured you're in the same boat. Right now, I discovered, if anybody else is interested in talking about this stuff, I'd love to chat with you. So I have a farm that I bought, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I wire this thing? So how can I figure out, how do I make it so that I can have a sensor on the chicken coop that communicates over the course of, many acres, and you can't use Wi-Fi and there's not good cell coverage out here. And so I discovered this whole new area called LoRa, long range. And there's a whole thing called LoRaWAN, and there's a bunch of startups in this whole ecosystem, but it's like an untapped brand new market that commercial areas love. And so that's really interesting.
I have a ton of people who are working in this space.
Are you?
Including agro. So.
Okay. You got my email on the chat thing. yeah. But it's I love new areas of just exciting, unbound area, which is why I used to be excited in AR. Sadly, AR sort of is doing its thing. I was hoping it would get more exciting.
Technology of the future, and it always will be.
Yeah.
you would do something new, because I have.
It's just more fun.
So, yeah.
How about you?
Right now, I'm trying to fill a gap. Search party, fill a gap that I think is gaping. Search party for missing kids and people, and lots of service. But I have some ideas that are also like, I could do that better.
Yeah.
So,
I like those. I just like working on something new. You know what it is for me? It's that shiny. I've got like the moth thing. I see the flame and I run toward it.
Well, it's a harder sell. I used to. I don't want to drag this out, but like a trivia question: who invented the CD for optical storage? Who invented it?
I don't know.
Sony.
Oh, I did know that, but I forgot.
And Philips. So when I worked at Philips, it was Philips was 13th to market. Sony was first.
Yeah.
But they both they co-invented it. So once the technology's out there, you're either leading it like Alta Vista, or you're making it work better like Google, right?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky thing, but I would rather do something that nobody's ever done before. I always say that in interviews, which is a hard sell also.
I know. It's a hard sell. It's just way more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to do the same. I don't want to be the guy who you sit in the chair and do what the guy was doing before me.
Yeah. You can work it.
On the other hand, there's something to be said for building the better mousetrap. So, I agree. I would come Monday. I would rather be doing the new shiny thing, which I am doing for this. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll email you about the other stuff. Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. And if anybody else is into the LoRaWAN whole thing,
I have.
I used to work at Intel.
I used to work at Intel. This is one of my products. Like, I've done all kinds of stuff with hardware and software and makers.
Is that an Edison?
Sorry?
Is that an Edison?
I worked on Edison. This is the Arduino 101.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Several people, Seed Studios, Arduino, all these people.
Here's my Arduino LoRaWAN I'm experimenting on right now. Yeah.
That's probably Andrea Ricchetti is my friend over there. He's doing that stuff.
So, cool. Okay.
Seed Studio just did a whole thing in Shanghai on agriculture. So they're doing all the hardware you need to set up sensors all over a farm and everything. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. I got to chat. I've got 240 acres of mowing I got to figure out.
just talk to Violet. I know all the people you need to talk to over there.
Oh,
so,
cool. Yeah. Shoot me an email. I'd love to chat.
Marty,
great to meet everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you guys soon. Send me an email if you guys have questions, especially if you hit traction. I love companies that are about 50 people and they're realizing, holy shit, we don't know what we're doing. I mean, and not in terms of the product. You guys have clearly found product if you've got 50 people, but more like wow, how do you manage? How do you hire? How do you reorg? You know, all this crazy stuff. That's my sweet spot.
Yeah, operational maturity, right? How do you turn into a grown-up?
Yeah, making those little baby companies into grown-ups. Cool. Okay, talk to you guys all soon.
Alrighty, you guys, take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.